Hi everybody, my name is Will Borger. I am here at Bandai Namco headquarters in Irvine, California, and with me is Tekken producer Michael Murray. Michael, thank you for being here. It's
my pleasure.
Awesome. We've also joined by Jin Kazama and some other really cool stuff from Tekken 8's collections. Just a little bit of visual flair here. We're going to talk Tekken. We're going to talk a lot of Tekken.
All things Tekken.
All things Tekken. And so, I think I wanted to kind of start off with some questions about the technical side of it, maybe some legacy stuff from Tekken. Obviously, Tekken has been huge in pushing not only fighting games, but game technology forward. And, you look at Tekken 8 and you can see it. It's beautiful. So can you guys talk about kind of what you wanted to accomplish going into Tekken 8 and how you set about doing it?
Right. So I guess first touch on Tekken 7 a little bit, that was a big learning experience. We released the game and supported it for 5 years, and we kind of had a little bit of a chance there to kind of test different things and see what resonates with fans a lot. And like you said, Tekken's a long-running series, so we learned many things, such as people like villainous characters for guest characters and things like that. But also, towards the end, I think one of your favorite characters, Lydia, was added. Mm-hmm. We noticed that, back in the day, maybe around Tekken 3 or so, a lot of people mentioned that they really loved that real martial arts. So one of the themes was trying to bring that back at that end with Wing Chun and Okinawan Karate, etc. But another key theme was that they picked up Tekken because fighting games were kind of a benchmark for what particular hardware could do at the time. Mm-hmm. And especially Tekken was known for its graphics at the time, and Soul Calibur and some of our other fighting games. So we really wanted to make sure that we had the graphic elements covered for this time. Being on a new generation of hardware, this is the first time we were on PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make sure that everything just really popped. And so it's not just about having pretty 4K graphics, but the environments, the characters, the detail, the depth, all of that visually, that whole experience. To achieve that, we actually, throughout all the character models that we had from Tekken 7, we started scratch. So all the characters, all 32 in the roster, were built from zero, which was quite entertaining because we're doing the sculpting and everything from scratch. And so it was interesting to see kind of weird looking Jin Kazama at first, for example. And it's like, it doesn't look quite right, even though most of us have been doing this for 20-some years, right? Mm-hmm. And so it took a little bit of trial and error until the models got perfect. But then once we showed off Kazuya, I think it was at EVO that year, we were like, wow, okay, we're ready. And the fans just they exploded with excitement over the level of detail and quality that we had in the game models. And then I think now that people have had a chance to play the CAT and the CNT as well and got their hands on the game, they see that not only the character models, but the environments themselves. Like we were playing earlier, I believe you saw the New York stage that we had. Mm-hmm. Just the level of detail, not just how pretty it is, but the puddles on the ground and the reflections, all the different billboards and the detail there. I think all of that, the graphical level that we were able to attain for Tekken 8 was one of the early goals we had, and I'm pretty happy at the benchmark we hit so far. I mean, obviously, Rada says we're not done. We can do more. But I think what we have so far is pretty great.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you can see in like the models, as you said. As someone who lives in New York, the New York stage made me very happy because it looks like you could walk through the city and see some of that stuff. So obviously, huge advantages from kind of leaving behind the last-gen consoles, focusing entirely on the new generation. Another big thing that people, I think, are really excited about for various reasons, and it is just a toolkit, right? But Unreal Engine 5, is there anything cool that has allowed you guys to do, or what are some of the benefits?
So there's various things. Some of them are user facing, some of them are more just development wise. So obviously Tekken 7 was the first time we used an external engine. Up until then it was always just our programmers coding the game. So when we made the switch to UE4 for Tekken 7, many people probably don't know, but it mainly just handles the drawing the graphics. Mm-hmm. The actual mechanics of the game and all of that underlying stuff is done in our own proprietary code and scripting. And that's also the case this time as well for UE5. So all the enhancements that you see to the graphics and that nature, the lighting and the character models and all that stuff, making the game look pretty is handled by UE, but all the underlying game mechanics and things like that is still our technology. That said, on the development, it does make it a lot easier because before, when we were making past Tekken titles, it was mainly PlayStation hardware, but if we wanted to port it, it was much more difficult than if you have an engine, and makes it a lot more easy to port to the different platforms that you need to. So it makes development, a lot easier in certain aspects, and the game a lot prettier, I guess you could say. But maybe not as drastic changes as a lot of people would think. There is one other, it's quite interesting, is because UE, is an engine that a lot of people are familiar with. I have noticed a lot of non-Japanese engineers are now joining the team, which, in the past, that would have been difficult to try to get them up to speed on our current game code and how they were creating the game. But now you can just say, okay, this person has experience with UE5, so, and also for creating tools or something for the game, it's much easier to take those tools over to other games because they're, ported into UE5. So, yeah, several development aspects make it more convenient, I guess you could say.
That's great, right? It allows you to bring in talent that you otherwise wouldn't be able to use and just makes your lives easier, which, in a game that's doing as much as Tekken 8 obviously is probably very welcome, I would imagine. So, we've talked about the visuals, we've talked about it, but, that's something that people can see and it's immediately obvious. What are some of the cool things that, it could be a visual thing, it could be like a tech thing that people might not notice under the hood that you think really adds to the game, or just something you think particularly is really cool?
It's visible, right? But maybe a lot of people don't notice is the fine details in the graphics. So, you can do 4K, that's a resolution, right? It's more about the design of the stages, the atmosphere, the character models. And Harada actually did a lot more direction in that area this time, where he just was like, it has to be a lot more detail. Everything, you have to fit it into the small space. It has to look, spot on. So like I was talking about the reflections or just the atmosphere when I think you played the New York stage, there's two variations, but one of them's the evening and it transitions to the night. And so you go from this like gorgeous sunset and how that works to the snowflakes falling at night and the police car, the lights and all of that going on. So just that kind of ambiance, I guess you could say, the atmosphere that's created because of these small, minute details or like bumping into the hot dog cart causes all this stuff to fall out of it. I think like all of these little things alone aren't something that stands out, but when they all come together to kind of create that atmosphere in the battle arena that you've chosen, I think it's a lot more important than just like the resolution of the graphics per se.
It felt like every time I was playing a stage, I was noticing something new. You and I think, in some of the matches earlier today, were like, oh, you were playing Nina. Oh, her dress is dirty now, right?
Right.
And that stuff is so pretty and so detailed, and it's one of those things that you maybe don't necessarily notice while you're in the heat of battle, right? But you get those little moments. You're like, oh man, that's really cool. I appreciate that. So. Yeah, I think that's something that people can look forward to, is always finding something new to look at. Another thing that's kind of new, and this is a first for the series I know, is that this is the first time that you guys are doing a console release before an arcade release. Can you talk about how that changed your design process, the way you approach development, anything like that? Because obviously it's a huge change.
Yeah, that's a huge topic. So I know a lot of people, especially fighting gamers, you have like a certain audience with one installment, and you might have quite a different audience for the next. So I noticed a lot of people for Tekken 7 that had probably never played a Tekken before. So maybe they weren't quite aware that Tekken usually had this pace where you release in the arcades first, and then maybe you would port it to consoles, but more often there would be some kind of a 0.5 installment update to the arcade, and then it would come to consoles, right? Or console, depending on the installment. So that allowed us to first create the core gameplay mechanics, the core roster, to have people play that in the arcade, and then to do location tests. And we're talking in the arcade when not only in Japan and Korea, but you had it in North America and Europe, et cetera, at the time. So we could test the game in all these different locations. People were constantly playing it. We were able to update the game. And then finally, you have to add all the content for the console version, right? Whether that's some kind of a story or a mini game or customization. So that kind of iteration was really important for us early on getting the game really solid before we ported it to the console. So it's quite a big deal that this time we start from the consoles, right? And one thing that kind of changed along the way, I guess you could say, was around the Tekken 7 era. Not everyone had arcades in the region. So we saw that the arcade installment released in Asia and in Japan, but maybe not in the West. So we actually had to take arcade boards to EVO one year to give access to players who wanted to play the game, et cetera. So it kind of, that model became not as viable as it had in the past. And another problem with that model was that when we started doing esports more, like a more cohesive league that we did ourselves, the Tekken World Tour, that a lot of people were unhappy that Japan had the game before because they had arcades, right? And other people who didn't have access until later had to play catch up. So it's quite important this time that everyone starts at the same timing with the game, and it's supported by esports, et cetera. But what this means is we have to find another way to first build the game, the base, the roster, the gameplay mechanics. It has to feel completely new, different from 7. All of this stuff for just the core game. And then we also have to create all of the customization and the bells and whistles that people expect from a console release, all at the same time. So since we don't have location tests, we had to find different ways to go about it. Obviously, since it's connected via the internet, we can pull data from like the CNT that we did recently, the upcoming CBT. We also took the game around in a CAT, the first iteration, to Evo and Combo Breaker to get some hands-on time. So we replaced the location test with these kind of big tournaments and then the network. And we're able to gain feedback from the fans on what they like about the gameplay mechanics, the balancing of the individual characters, if the game is accessible or approachable, easy to understand. All of these different things we had to change for Tekken 8 because it's starting first on console. So it's quite a big change.
It sounds like quite a challenge too, to be able to, not have that time, I guess, to iterate and be like, okay, right now we can just focus on this, and later when we bring it to consoles, we can add, the story mode, we can add the, fun mini games like the returning Tekken Ball, which we'll talk about later. But yeah.
And it's even a challenge just to do what I said right now, but when you consider that we're not even like reusing some of the models and brushing them up, but creating them from scratch, just even added more to that difficulty. So it's really a huge challenge, and I'm just really impressed with the team of how they've been able to rise to the occasion.
Every time I look at it, I'm just amazed by all this. You tell me like we rebuilt everything, and I'm just, and there's so much, and you're just like, I don't know how you did that. To kind of change gears from, another big important part of Tekken aside from the tech is the story, right? And the story's been running for a really long time. People are super into it. I'm super into it. I'm not gonna lie. I love the Tekken story. I'm excited to see what happens in 8. Can you talk about, what we might expect to see from like Tekken 8 story mode? Is it this similar to Tekken 7's? Or are we doing a little bit different? What can we expect?
So Tekken 8, I think we've shown a little bit in some of the trailers about the story mode. So people who played 7 will kind of know a little bit what to expect. That it was a quite popular mechanic that we did previously, where you have the CG movie that kind of sets the tone for the scene. In this case, the battle between Kazuya and Jin in the New York stage, I think everyone's probably seen in the trailer so far. But then it transitions with no loading or anything straight into the actual battles, right? And then with Tekken 7, while you're playing through the story, it's not just, fight CPU 1, fight CPU 2, and they have a short exchange, etc. There's a lot of different CG scenes that kind of give a little bit more background into what's going on with the characters. You have little mini games, like Lars had this. He could shoot a gun on one of the stages, if you remember. Yeah. So there's little things like that where you change up the combat that you don't typically find in the head-on-head combat in Tekken 8. So that kind of stuff is, we could say, it's safe to say that it'll return for Tekken 8. Obviously, it'll look a lot better. And the volume also has been increased for Tekken 8. And I can't talk a whole lot about some of the story content yet. But we can say that, it leaves off with Tekken 7. We saw that conclusion between father and son, Heihachi and Kazuya. And now that shifts to that kind of conflict between Kazuya and his son, Jin. And the kind of surprise return of Jun after so many years. So we realized that some of the story arcs have been kind of left hanging, and we tied some of them up in Tekken 7, but some cool things like that are in the story as well. Plus, you've seen we've been adding new characters throughout 7, and we announced Azucena as well. So seeing how these characters appear in that will be something to look forward to, I think.
And it's also interesting because it's kind of, Tekken has been about the Mishimas for so long, and this conflict, kind of generationally that gets passed down between father and son. And Tekken 7 kind of resolved part of that, and now Tekken 8 is kind of setting itself up to resolve another part of that, perhaps. We don't know.
Perhaps,
we don't know. But, can you, is there ever a version of Tekken's story? I mean, maybe we just do the Mishima thing forever, and that would be fine with me, but where, and I believe Harada-san has talked about this at one point, where like it moves beyond them to something else. Is that a possibility? Is that a thing? You know, do you guys ever think about stuff like that?
It could be. It's tough because the main protagonist of the story depends on who your favorite character is, right?
Yes.
So, and we can't make like 32 different versions of a story. It used to almost be like that with old Tekken. If you clear the mode, you get the ending.
Yeah, the arcade.
It was hard to tell who actually won the tournament because it depends on whose perspective it was, etc. But now it's more tied into a centralized story with the story mode. But then we realized that people want to know more about their favorites. So we also have the character episodes that were in Tekken 7 are making a return for Tekken 8. And they're some of my personal favorites because I think when we look back at what made Tekken popular, I was touching on the graphics, the real martial arts. Another was the comedy, I think. Like Tekken Series 7 had a really serious tone overall, I think. But a lot of people miss some of the goofiness that happened with Paul and Law, or Law had the restaurant and he had to sell it to pay for it, and his son wrecked the motorcycle, or Paul did something really crazy. So that comedic element makes a little bit more of a return this time around, I think, especially in the character episodes.
Finally, before we move on to kind of the features of the game, I wanted to ask about the way that Tekken 8 has changed, because obviously it's changed between, the alpha and then the CNT, and now we're in the CBT starting soon. What are some of the things that have changed from maybe the CNT to the CBT that you were excited for people to get their hands on and get feedback from?
Right. So I think a lot of the changes that people who've been following the game will be happy about are obviously Heat's a brand new mechanic. When I say Heat in the mechanic, there's several tied to it, right? Like the Heat Smash, Heat Dash,
Heat Engagers,
etc. So what we noticed was Heat was supposed to be an access to all kinds of different tools that players can creatively use as they please. But it seemed to kind of settle into a pattern when the pro players started to play, where they would launch someone and then do a heat burst right in the middle of a combo and then continue with a heat dash to the wall, etc. So it looked like the combos were quite long, it did a lot of damage, and it was just the same use in every case. So we wanted to change it up a bit. So the way that people will be using the heat burst and dash is not the same. So we won't be seeing those kind of extended combos where someone's getting juggled for so long. And we'll see people hopefully using it in other manners. And this is the way that the heat gauge is depleted, et cetera, has changed a bit because of that. But also when you do a heat burst, so like you were saying, there's the heat engager, with you start by hitting your opponent with a certain move, and then there's the heat burst, which you can trigger like automatically, right, at any time. When you trigger that, now you have armor, which you probably noticed in our fights, where you would hit me with something, and then I would engage the heat with that, and I would, eat the attack with the armor, but then I would have the heat and access to all the tools that has. So we're hoping to see a little bit of a difference in the way people start employing that in matches because of that change. But then there's a bunch of others, right? We saw that a lot of people were asking for being able to button map stuff for the L3 and R3. And we were able to do that, so quick fix, and people are happy. So we added that, and then also a big change, since we talked a lot about the special style. I touched on that, but it used to be you had square, triangle, and cross and circle, right? Each had maybe one attack each, but now we have the combination of directional inputs for some of those, which gives you more choices for the special styles. It is a huge change as well. Not just that, but also we realized in the CNT, people have a variety of different characters that they try out, and then they settle on a favorite probably for the test. And we looked at some of the character usage, and maybe some of the characters that didn't get as much playtime as we had hoped. We kind of reevaluated them and maybe added a few techniques or revamped their mechanics a little bit to make them more interesting. So there's a few characters that have had some adjustments since then as well.
Wow. Yeah, so there's quite a bit, even if you've played the CNT, to get in there and get excited about. And based on all the characters that we've played over the last couple of days, I have noticed some of those changes just for the characters I was playing. And it's been a lot of fun to see, what has changed with the heat system, what's changed with them. And I think anybody who has not played the CNT is going to come in and it feels incredibly natural. And if you have played the CNT, you're going to be like, oh, that's cool. So obviously a lot to look forward to there for people, new or old, to Tekken 8 betas.
And then, of course, the 3 characters that weren't in the CNT. So. Yes. Azucena, and then Fenway and Raven.
And all of them feel really, really, really good to play as. It's been an absolute blast to play those
And the
characters.
stage, the Ortiz farm, right?
Yes, with the alpacas. And the wall launchers. Yeah, that stage is easily one of my favorites so far. And I'm excited to see the crazy stuff people are going to do with wall launchers because I know it's going to look awesome. But I wanted to ask if you could say anything to maybe veteran Tekken players or new players who are looking at Tekken 8. What would you want them to know about Tekken 8? What would you say to players if you could say one thing to them?
I'd say first, thank you for supporting Tekken 7 because that's what made all this possible, to have such a great sequel to the game and to be able to do all the things that we're doing with Tekken 8. So obviously that first. But then I meet a lot of people in my travels. What do you do? I make Tekken. Oh, I love that game. I played so much of Tekken 3 or Tekken 5. I want those people to try this game again. The story is set in a way that we can refresh you and catch you up on stuff you may have missed. So even if this is your first Tekken or maybe the first Tekken in 10 years or whatever, you can enjoy the story. And I think the mechanics, there are some things that you'll remember and it'll become muscle memory. You'll pick it up right away. And some things that it'll be easier to learn because of all the things that we talked about today. So I think now is a really exciting time to join the community, whether that's esports because all the stuff that's going on now, like you were talking about Rev Major this past weekend and also the finals coming up. In New Orleans. It's just, I've been on the project for 20 some years and I don't know if I've ever seen this much hype around the game. I think it's the perfect time to jump into. And I hope we're making it quite easy to do that in Tekken 8. So I hope everyone will check it out.
Yeah, I think that you are, and I know a lot of people that I have talked to that are like, I've always wanted to jump back in, or this is the one I'm really going to want, and all of them have been like, this is the one, I can already tell. So I think players are going to be really excited to do that. And finally, as just kind of a fun question, because I asked, last year when we interviewed Harada-san prior to the big reveal at the Game Awards, if he could throw any Tekken character into a volcano, who would he pick? And he gave a fantastic answer. So now I have to ask you, if you could throw any Tekken character into a volcano, who would you pick and why?
Like Harada, depending on the day, I can think of several people I'd like to throw in there. But in Japan, we have this word called chunibyo, which means like you have this thing where you think maybe one day you'll get hit on the head and you'll wake up and you have superpowers like Jin Kazama, right? And the team often laughs at me because I'm that kind of category on the team. So if I respond well to something like this Jin in Tekken 8, he's got all of those elements, they're like, great, we have that checked off. So with that in mind, I would say I would provoke someone to throw me into the volcano. So hopefully that would activate the Devil Jin, and then I would get these superpowers, would be my answer.
That is a fantastic and very brave answer.
If it doesn't work out, I don't know, but
at least you tried, right?
Right.
And lots of upside if you get it right. I want to say thank you once again. It's Michael Murray, producer on Tekken 8, longtime producer on Tekken. You've been on that series for more than 20 years, for sitting down with us, for doing this incredible interview. And thank you to all of you who've been watching. We put a lot of work into this. I hope it made you excited about Tekken 8 and gave you a little more information about the game. And for everything else Tekken and fighting game and video game related, keep it here at IGN.